community. Please note that this session is being recorded and follows the ICANN expected standards of behavior. To ensure full transparency of participation in ICANN's multi-stakeholder model, we ask that you sign into Zoom sessions using your full name. For example, first name and last name or surname. To rename your signing name for this webinar, you will need to first exit the Zoom session. It's important to remember that you may be removed from this session if you do not sign in using your full name. Interpretation for this session will include the 6 official UN languages, which are Arabic, Chinese, French, Russian, Spanish, and English. Click on the interpretation icon in Zoom and select the language you will listen to during this session. For our panelists, please state your name for the record and the language you will speak if speaking a language other than English. Before speaking, ensure you have selected the language you will speak from the interpretation menu. Also, please be sure to mute all audible notifications and speak clearly and slowly for our interpreters. This discussion is between the ICANN board and the ALAC members only. Therefore, we will not be taking questions from the audience today. However, all participants may make comments in the chat. Please use the drop-down menu in the chat pod and select Respond to all panelists and attendees. This will allow everyone to view your comments. To view the real-time transcription, click on the closed caption button in the Zoom toolbar. Having said this, I will now hand it over to the ICANN board chair, Maarten Botterman. Maarten, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Franco, and welcome, Maureen, and all ALAC people on this call for a conversation with us about subjects of mutual care. ICANN 73 is an opportunity for us to interact directly with you, and we really appreciate that opportunity. The dialogues as such are well prepared beforehand by an exchange of questions, and a habit has become to first go into the questions from you and then ask you for a reflection on some of the questions we asked to you. So with that, really feel that actively seeking ways in which the board also can facilitate the community better by being more proactive, by seeking open dialogue more and more, and always with deep respect for the role of the community and a value for the work in the bottom-up multi-stakeholder way, is the way forward. And look forward to what we can achieve together here in the coming hour. So with that, we've asked Leon to chair and facilitate this session. Leon, please take this away.
Thank you very much, Maarten, and thank you everyone for attending this session. Welcome. I always say it's coming back home. It's only that I brought some friends with me this time. So, so I hope this is a good session. And to begin with, let me just switch a little bit to Spanish, because I want to provide you with a message in commemoration of the International Women's Day. Bien, pues quiero empezar la sesión reconociendo a todas mis compañeras, no solo de el board, en donde tenemos, por supuesto, compañeras sumamente valiosas que todos los días trabajan para que nuestra organización sea mejor, sino también a mis compañeras de la comunidad de at large y de otras partes de la comunidad, a las que tengo mucho que agradecer por todas las enseñanzas, por todo el trabajo que imprimen. Y bueno, pues hacer o mantener la promesa de seguir trabajando por que ustedes puedan tener obviamente igualdad de oportunidades, una mayor inclusión y espacios seguros en donde se puedan desarrollar con toda seguridad, con toda confianza y pues aprovechar al máximo el potencial que tienen que ofrecernos. Muchas gracias por su trabajo. Y ahora volveré a el canal en inglés. Good. So it's time to work. So if we could please, well, of course, Maureen, if you want to say some words to welcome us all to this session as well. And if we could also, after Maureen provides us with her welcoming words, if we could put the first question on the screen. So Maureen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Maarten and Leon, for welcoming us to the session. We're always very pleased to be able to have these short discussions with you, and as well as sort of like on other occasions that we do. But we've got, you know, three different presentations today in response to your questions, and I hope you find them enlightening, and that the discussions that we have today, you know, sort of help both the board and at large sort of like proceed in a way that's helpful for each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maureen. So if we could please have the first question on the screen, and Maureen, who would like to pose the question to the board?
We have Marita Moll for this particular section.
Thank you, Maureen. Marita?
Thank you, Leon and Maureen. Marita Moll for the record. These first two questions, I'm picking on these first two questions. I just wanted to start the first one. Has the board ever considered a project to establish some indicators of volunteer value to the MSM enterprise? I want to start it with a saying which I think is attributed to Einstein, but I'm not totally sure whether that's true or not. And I hope that this translates somehow. The saying is, not everything that counts is counted, but everything that is counted counts. Now, we know that the pandemic has taken a huge toll on everyone. We suddenly found our lives upended and our children not at school, our workplaces closed, people getting ill and sometimes tragically dying. Through all this, the volunteers, with nothing personal to gain from it, have continued working on policy development and procedures to keep the multi-stakeholder process going. This is our 7th virtual meeting. Can hardly believe it. For me, I haven't attended as many real meetings, actually. I think that's probably true of many of the almost 200 people who are listening. But in fact, the volunteer community has doubled down, undeterred, despite the extra load that the pandemic has placed on everyone's lives. I know this is an extraordinary achievement, and I know everyone agrees with this. There's no denying that the dedication of these volunteers, hours on Zoom, pro bono, not as part of their job or any career development, keeping the multi-stakeholder project legitimate because without this segment of the population, there would be a big gap in participation. So the volunteers are contributing their time, sometimes their money. Yes, this also happens and it's common, despite the fact that there's sometimes little to show for it for years because the work takes years to come to completion. So I'm asking the board, isn't it time to start measuring the value of this volunteer work, because everything that is counted counts. Volunteerism is a social indicator, which is used in various indexes that measure the quality of our economic, social, and environmental health. Measuring the volunteer economy, sometimes called the third sector, within particular enterprises is not unheard of. A check into the research on such matters shows it can and is being done. We at large would like to suggest that it's time to develop some indicators about the work being done here by volunteers. Indicators which would offer a way to recognize and beyond that value the work. I know that there is one award for annual for volunteer commitment, but most of the people who are working in the trenches don't see their names on that award. It takes years. The question, has the board ever considered a project to establish some indicators of the volunteer value to the MSM enterprise? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Marita, for this question. And no doubt that volunteers at the very core of our community, and their work is highly appreciated But I would like to provide you with a little bit more flesh on this topic, and for that I would like to ask my colleague Mandla Simang if she could provide us with some insights.
Great. Thanks for the question, and thanks, Leon, for handing over to me. So I think, as you've said, and as Leon's also said, it kind of goes without saying. And I think the problem is, like you said, if you don't notice it, do you notice it? That volunteers are central to the model, to the multi-stakeholder model. And the spirit of volunteerism is really important to the model that we have in place. And so as a board and as ICANN as a whole, we've paid special attention to making sure that we retain and refresh our community volunteers with new and active participants so that we can deliver on our mission. And so we completely agree that the retention of models and the recognition of volunteers and the recognition of the very important work that volunteers do needs to be somehow acknowledged and quantified. And I think the question that you ask about specific indicators is an interesting one, and something we can talk more about. But just to highlight some of the initiatives that we've undertaken to provide opportunities to attract new participants from diverse backgrounds. We've done quite a few regional engagement sessions, ICANN readouts, and capacity development. Even now during this trying pandemic time when we have to do all of this via Zoom. And we've taken a lot of efforts to attract new stakeholders in our regions as an important priority to make sure that there are enough volunteers for the technical and policy work that they contribute to continue, but also just to raise awareness amongst key influencers, whether it's in business and government, academia, and civil society. Since ICANN 72 alone, ICANN's community-facing teams have supported almost 100 regional virtual events, workshops, webinars, and readouts and trainings, and have participated in regional and national IGF schools of internet governance and gap capacity training. So I can go on about these various contributions, and I think what I'm trying to show is really the importance that we do recognize the importance of the volunteer sector and having to keep volunteers involved and as part of the community as an important part of the multi-stakeholder model. And I think our language policy, which provides all of these trainings and initiatives in Arabic, Chinese, French, Spanish, Russian, Portuguese, and English, supports this further. So we've tried to understand where there are gaps in participation and to seek out new stakeholders and influencers. And a lot of our engagement effort has really shifted outside of the regular meeting rotation into regional and national discussions. I think partially in recognition of the ways that we've had to shift how we work given the pandemic. And I think that the specific question around indicators, as you posed, is an interesting one to try and measure. And I think that's always the challenge with the multi-stakeholder model. How do you measure the actual impact of whether it's the volunteers or the different activities or the different policy initiatives that have been taken on? So we've given consideration to it. And I think as part of our ongoing engagements, if you have any proposals around those ways of measuring, that would be really helpful to hear that and to take it forward. I think that's my initial first stab at the question. If any one of my colleagues has anything to add.
Thank you, Mandla. And maybe Matthew, would you like to add something to what Mandla has said already?
Yes, thanks, Leona. Mandla said it brilliantly. Just to add, because there have been a couple of questions about not only about bringing volunteers on, but how do you retain people's interest in the work at ICANN going forward? And I think this is perhaps the more challenging one, right? How do you move from the initial bringing in of people who are new to the ICANN space, and how do you get them to stay and to work? And then how do you retain them when they're doing that work? And I think this really comes back to some of the other questions that we've been having as a community about how do we show a return on the work that they're doing? How do they see progress in the work that they're doing? How do they see when it's being implemented? What is the impact of that work? And a number of those issues, I think, are also key to retaining volunteers as well. So there's a, if you will, there's an arc of what work needs to be done to ensure that volunteers are retained in the ICANN world. And I think that covers a whole range of other issues that we've been talking about, from broader issues like evolving the multi-stakeholder model to other initiatives. So in a way, it doesn't just stop in those in the early days. This retention, this need to retain, and the need to give that some recognition is critical throughout the lifetime of work that people contribute to ICANN. Let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Does anyone from my colleagues want to add anything or follow on the topic?
Yeah, I put my hand up, Ms. Aubrey.
Oh, thank you, Aubrey. I hadn't seen your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. I wanted to add a little bit to this, if I could. I think that there is an appreciation of the work that is put in by people. I think, you know, whether it's volunteers or it's people that might be getting paid something for their work, but contribute far more than is expected of them, you know, beyond hours. But the whole contribution, I think, is appreciated. But I think that there may also be an issue with people not being able to trust that they're being appreciated, that we don't feel appreciated. And this goes somewhat to, you know, what Matthew has said, is people that are volunteering a lot of their time with absolutely no compensation sometimes feel frustrated and not compensated, and that affects their trust with the organization, with the methods, with the practices. And one of the, and I'm trying to associate this to one of the board operational priorities that we have, and that it was a token that I was given to sort of figure out, is how do we measure this trust? How do we measure whether trust is improving, and looking at things that we can measure? Now, I had not thought of this as a particular issue that we could get into the measurement when we're looking at the trust issue, but it actually seems a very good one. It's not only how do we show the appreciation, but how do you trust that you are being appreciated? And so in terms of looking for metrics, and this is something that I'd very much like to, you know, have later conversations with people, especially some of you that are measurement mavens, to figure out, how do you measure the various trust aspects that we have in our multi-stakeholder processes, including trusting that you are valued, that your work is appreciated, even if you don't get as much of the things you want through. In other words, how do you measure it even through frustration? So I really like the idea of doing something with this, and I'm hand waving because I don't really know exactly what, but I think it's a great idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Aubrey. I see Martin's hand is up.
Yeah, no, just, I mean, volunteers are at the fundament of what we do, and people with passion as well. Those that are paid, I think an example given is people that go well beyond what you could normally expect from even an employee from the org. There are some people that work throughout weekends, overnight, all kind of time zones as well. With regards to volunteers, which is the fundament of the bottom-up multi-stakeholder work, it must be clear that we value them very much, and there may be better ways of expressing it. I think that we don't value them would be a narrative that I wouldn't buy into. That's not true. How to deal with it is a different thing. How to honor it, how to recognize it. I think that is something where we can improve upon, and the suggestions made may help to do that. So from that perspective, let's seek what we indeed can do, as Avri and others have suggested as well, and Amandla. But also, let's continue to build out our basis for volunteers. And as you know, ICANN is providing assistance in that, in terms of capacity building workshops, capacity building, reach out, traveling in the future to different places around the world to allow newcomers to come in as well. And let's also seek to express when we engage with new people, when we work in capacity building ways, how we appreciate that and how that is expressed best. So I'm just wanting to steer away from a narrative that we don't value our volunteers, because that's, I believe, fundamentally not true. But that find ways that we can better express how we appreciate it and how we can maybe measure their satisfaction in their participation to the process. And last but not least, let's continue to work together also to find new ways to build out the volunteer base to a broader base as well. So really appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maarten. And I see Alan's hand up. Alan?
Thank you very much. One of the key parts of the intervention was counting. And I'll note that although those who are paid to be here and those who may not even be paid but benefit professionally from being here, and there's a lot of intellectual property attorneys who may not be reimbursed, but they're serving their own purpose by being here, their business purpose. We don't even ask the question. We have no way of knowing how many people are here because they're good public servants and how many are actually getting paid or benefiting professionally from this. And if we don't even have a measure of that, now that's not saying we don't need all those people who are paid to be here. They're important participants in the multi-stakeholder model. But we're referring to the other segment that are not paid. And, given that we don't even ask the question, we don't attempt to figure out how many there are of one versus the other. I'm not quite sure how you can send the message that we care very much about that kind of participation, that kind of volunteer. We use the same word for them. And in all of the board interventions I heard, or most of the board interventions I heard, whatever was said applied to both. And the differentiation, I think, is what we're trying to get at. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. So, of course, as you may have heard, I think that volunteer value and appreciation is at top of our mind. And as I started saying, it's at the very core of our organization and our community. But maybe, the challenge here is if we are going to assign some value or measure some value on volunteer work, how could we possibly do that? I'm not questioning, I'm asking for guidance, right? So which would be the best way to measure this value, and which would be the avenues in which we could go down and say, okay, let's establish these parameters and start measuring the value of volunteer work? And the next question is, would everyone like to be measured according to those parameters? Because I see this as a two-edged sword in which, yes, we might have some positive outcome, but then again, I think there could also be some downhills on this. So I see Marita's hand is up. Marita.
Thank you, Leon, for that. And thank you, everyone, for the great support that you have indicated for a suggestion that we could develop something, which I'm calling indicators, to show, and I like the idea of the trust, to show the trust that this is being recognized, the work is being recognized. Ellen's point about, there's two kinds of volunteers. That's also something we're all very hesitant to talk about. To your point, Leon, We do not have to reinvent the wheel here. This is being done. It has been done. There are ways of doing it. I don't, as far as I know that we've actually looked into methods and consulted experts about how one goes about measuring the contribution of a volunteer of a third sector as we have here. There are certainly processes in different countries doing that sort of thing. And so I'm suggesting that we could be looking into it, and we could come up with at least some further ideas on where we could go from here. Thank you.
And I love that idea, Marita. Let's by all means look into it, and let's look at ways in which we can together try to come to solutions or formulas in which we could address this issue, because I think it's again at top of everyone's mind. So yes, happy to work with you and try to figure out how we can better deal and address this issue. So if there are no further comments or questions on this topic, I would like to go back to you, Maureen, so we can continue with the next question that the ALAC has prepared.
Thank you, Leon. And yes, moving on to the next sort of like speaker. And I guess in a way it sort of like it is related to the first question, but from a different perspective. And we have Joanna Kalesha to present that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and thank you to Leon and the board for giving us an opportunity to speak about these important issues. With at large being volunteer-based, these topics are very close to our hearts. We would like to touch upon two elements regarding improving the policy development processes. I will start with the element that is linked to Marita's intervention, and then I will briefly hand the floor to Sebastian to discuss the processes behind this. I would like to link on the metrics that Marita has mentioned, taking for granted the fact that volunteer input is indeed appreciated, valued, and I will leave the discussions around the definitions and transparency aside. I would like to emphasize the need to ensure a balance of resources which are available to, as Alan indicated, true volunteers and those who are professionals involved in the PDPs, where the latter provide their PDP input as part of their everyday professional tasks. Their participation does not compete against their day jobs, as it often does for at-large volunteers doing this as sort of a hobby. If ICANN wants to keep the end user input representative and valid, rather than a fig leaf, as we have been accused of before, validating the decisions which are being made, it might consider introducing additional incentives for those volunteers who offer their input and time into the PDPs. And while we have raised this issue before, this is nothing new, this need has made itself very clear during the challenging COVID times. Introducing additional incentives would give the at-large community a better position to attract new, highly qualified members, volunteers, who are both versed in ICANN policies and other issues which are relevant there too. Outside the pandemic, the opportunity to participate in face-to-face meetings has proven largely sufficient to retain volunteer participation, although we have always struggled with ensuring professional stability for our volunteers. And COVID has often made everyday life professional commitments highly incompatible with those related to ICANN involvement, including but not limited to time zone issues. We welcome the steps which have been taken thus far, everything that was described in responses to the previous intervention, including but not limited to the ICANN Pandemic Internet Access Reimbursement Program. And we would welcome suggestions from the board on what steps could be further taken to advance volunteer interest and input into the PDPs. And with this, I'm going to hand the floor over to Sebastian to briefly indicate the priorities or the overall priorities for the need of a holistic review. Thank you. With your permission, Maureen, I would like to hand the floor to Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Joanna. But I can't I will be short, but I can't take the floor here without taking my hat from Uralo and saying a few words about the situation in our country, in our continent, because it's very painful, and we can't just discuss everything and not reminding of what is happening. Therefore, I wanted just to say a few words on that, and we are really concerned, and it's a deep trouble here. ATRT3, to come back to the ICANN directly staff, issue 5 recommendation. One of the 2 high priority for ATRT3 was about assessment of specific and organizational reviews. To come to this recommendation, all the current bylaw mandated review were explored in detail by the ATRT3 group, and a new holistic review was recommended. As the last complete overview of ICANN was made in 2002, 20 years ago, as this review must be done before any other review, it is important that this holistic review start soon. The budget must be included in fiscal year 2023, as well as the budget to allow 3 SOACs to start the continuous improvement program. ALAC and at large stand ready to put some effort on those reviews. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you very much, Sebastian. So this is, of course, a two-part question or topic. And well, I would like to start with the first part, of course. So the question is, how might the board ensure balance of resources available to volunteers versus professionals in ICANN PDPs who do their work in ICANN as part of their day job? I'm not sure if that's up to the board to find that balance. I think it's a matter for the community to try to find that balance and a way to approach that. I can give you some examples, of course, of efforts. You've mentioned a couple already, but I would like to maybe pull our attention to additional budget requests. I think that additional budget requests are a tool that can help foster these volunteer interest and engagement into pushing, of course, some projects that might help the different processes that are being carried out within the organization and the community. And I think that, of course, providing the whole community, I'm not talking about only what we usually think as volunteers, but I'm talking about the community at large. The job that we have as board is, of course, providing the organization with all the tools and means so that the organization can support the community. And to this end, I am aware that there might be some ups and downs in the relationship between community and org and the board, in which, I mean, I've been there before, of course, and I know that there are sometimes some issues that are not responded as agilely or as speedily as one would wish. But then again, we have limited resources. So again, the challenge here is to try to find this balance together. Remember that one of my flags has always been to not distinguish between the board, org, and the community. We are all in this together. We are on the same boat, and we are the board is formed from members of the community, and then we go back to the community once we finish our terms, etc. So I tend not to divide us in these three buckets. I like to see us as a united team. And in that regard, of course, again, I would like to encourage us to look for incentives and solutions together as we hold our bottom-up multi-stakeholder process. And I see Sebastian's hand is up, and I would also like, if you allow me, Sebastian, Maarten would like maybe to follow on what I've just said. So Maarten, if you would like to go first, and then I'll pass it on to Sebastian.
And thank you for indicating visibly your approval of me speaking first. Merci beaucoup pour ça. So just having heard this, and Joanna, I so much appreciate the discussion, but let's avoid that we get to a situation where anybody would consider volunteers to be a fig, or volunteer involvement to be a fig leaf. I've seen people that would, in any definition, whatever you define it, be seen as a volunteer, and they've made a big difference in where we got to today, not a fig leaf. And whereas I see the topic of, so how do we help those who don't have other financial resources to contribute constructively and consistently to this? That's a good question, and that's one we've continuously tried to improve upon over time. But let me assure you, and then please let's go on to other discussions, but the board takes the input from volunteers very seriously, and we listen to all input. At the same time, we also listen to the input of professionals that are paid for their job, as we are to do too. But for sure, that doesn't weigh heavier than the volunteer input. We look at both with equal interest. So I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding about that. And thank you for your patience, Sebastian. No doubt you're next.
Thank you, Leon and Maarten. I just wanted to take the opportunity of Leon talking about additional budget request. I have the impression that at the beginning it was advanced budget request, but it is additional budget request. And there are a lot who are very, very useful and who are running well. This year we get 3 ABR for so-called Uralo. I don't know why it's called something different than the other, but and the 3 for the moment, we didn't spend 1 penny. One, because everything was done online, and there is no, even if we request for spending some money, it was always say no. And one is because we are since 6 months waiting for the first answer from staff. And the last one is because, yeah, they start to spend some money to print something. Therefore, I just want to be sure that we are not just doing things to be well and not using really. And I am concerned with the way some of the ABR, and I am not talking about all the ABR, but some are run. And I take this opportunity, and I am sorry for my friend from the staff, but to speak about that here. Thank you very much once again, Leon, to bring that issue to the table.
Thank you, Sebastian, and I'm sure that ORG does its best to support and to evaluate the different ABRs, and of course to provide those who have been approved with the speediness and the resources that are needed. Sorry to hear about these cases, but I'm sure that there must be an explanation for this. I don't have it myself, of course, but we'll definitely follow on this if you allow us. Jonathan?
Thanks, Leon. Jonathan Zook here for the record. This isn't a topic on which we've had a fulsome discussion even inside the at-large community and to achieve any real consensus. So I think this is, like many things, the start of a much longer conversation. One perspective that I wanted to bring up in the context of volunteers, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, not on behalf of the ALAC necessarily, is in the area of support. I feel like, and I use that word carefully, that the nature of staff support is somewhat different in the GNSO than it is in the at-large community. We have an expectation and a desire to participate in a very robust way in the policy development processes that are led in most instances by the GNSO. But the nature of staffing is very different between the GNSO and the at-large to accomplish that. And that means that a lot of effort falls on a few volunteers to almost play the role within the at-large community that staff play within the GNSO. And so I'd love to, and not to resolve on this call by any means, but to get a conversation going about staffing of the at-large, technology support for the at-large, et cetera, so that we are in a position to be a more sort of fulsome participant in the policy development process without the onus of that falling on volunteers. To me, that might be an easier thing than trying to draw a distinction between types of volunteers or anything like that. Having been both sorts of volunteers, I appreciate Becky's concerns about the difficulty in doing that. So I feel like there's an opportunity here to help the at-large be a better participant in policy development, to create better advice for the board, and I'd love to explore that. And again, not looking to resolve this on this call, but I felt the need just to say something. Thanks.
Can I make a comment?
Thanks, Jonathan. Of course, Göran, and after that, I will go to Edmund.
I mean, I'm a little bit surprised, JC, because I mean, I meet the leadership of ALAC many times, and we talk about different things, and we try to support you. And I think David Oliver could come into this as well, how to support you the best way. And we have together initiated certain programs. We have initiated work together, and I don't know how many calls we have supported for you during the last year. And I think I actually feel a little bit sad about your comments, because I thought that we had a really good conversation with the ALAC and the leadership. And often when I speak to you as a leadership, you do nothing else but giving me compliments, which I always said that's David and the team about how we do that support. We have given you proposals how to help you when it comes to, for instance, to straighten up the process for your advice, for instance. So I'm not really sure, and I would love to hear David's comments about this, but also with you again, then go back to this question to see if we misunderstood something. Thank you.
I'm happy to follow up, but I also don't need to dominate the conversation. So up to you, Leon.
If we could give space to Edmund, I mean, he wants to make some comments as well, and after that, I might come back to you because we're running out of time, and we still have one more question from the ALAC. So, Edmund.
Yeah, thank you, Leon. Edmund here. Actually, thank you, Jonathan, for bringing this up. Actually, I think it's a very pertinent point. I think I guess it's a little bit in response to Göran. I think the support and from staff and from org is probably very well. But as Jonathan also mentioned, this is not fully. Seems like it's not fully discussed at large yet, but I think it is a pertinent point, and perhaps the at-large would need to give better direction as to how the org and perhaps how the board can steer the org to give that type of support. I think it's not just whether it's more staff or not, but it's like I do agree that there is a difference from my personal experience, I guess, participating at large versus at GNSO as well. So I see your point, but I think it is pertinent, and I'd like to. It would be great to see better proposal coming from the at large, from the ALAC, to see how we could actually address those issues. So, thank you.
Thanks, Edmund. I see David's hand up as well. So, David, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, just briefly. With the recent shift of one staff member from the ALAC support from my team, there generally is 5 FTEs in support of the ALAC work. We decided that we would need to elevate that position. It's now out for hire, and also integrate that more fully as part of the policy and advice activities of ALAC to support them and what Jonathan was saying and their work. And so we're having a joint effort. We usually try to have the team of the full team of the policy support to mix and match and support when needed the various groups, including at large. And that's what we're having to do. And I've asked Heidi to look at a restructuring of the support to be able to focus more on the efforts of the policy and the advice of the at large. These are in the initial phases, but we will definitely want to do it that way so that we can enhance the quality of advice from at large and enhance their inputs by their facilitation that we would provide. So thank you.
Thank you very much, David. So are there any other comments or questions? Jonathan, would you like to say a last word on this topic?
I'll just briefly say in response to Joran that it wasn't meant to be an attack or a criticism, just an area of distinction, and a lot of this has gotten clarified in the chat. So we appreciate the help. We appreciate what the board has done with respect to improving the process of evaluating and communicating about advice, and all of that is great. I don't mean to be binary in the comments that I'm making, and so and David, thank you for your comments. I think that a staff person like that could make a great deal of difference to the at-large efforts to participate more fully in policy development. I mean, this is less about complaining and whining and more about making sure that our efforts are as efficient and as productive and valuable to the rest of the community as they can be, because we're better informed and better organized in that regard. So I appreciate what you've laid out, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any last comments from board colleagues or Ulrich? Yes, Sebastian?
Yeah, just to be sure that we change topic, but one thing it's important for at large, and I would like to underline that, is holistic review. We skip this discussion, and I have no problem with that, but just be aware that we think at large that it's very important and need to start as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. I think we are aware of that, and not only aware, but we share that same concern. So as it's been said, we're going to devote the time and resources that we need to put that in place. So we still have one more topic from the ALAC on this, and I would like to ask Maureen, who's going to lead on this.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you for this discussion we've just had. And it certainly, I just want to add that I certainly do appreciate the support that org staff have given at large over the last few months. It's just been very much appreciated. But there is Jonathan does have a point, and policy is important to us. So any help there is much appreciated. And I think too that this, what Cheryl Langdon-Orr is going to raise with us now is really the sort of effort that at large actually puts into our the work of ICANN, and she's going to explain exactly why it's important to us as well. Thank you. Sure.
Maureen, if I may, I first want to apologize because I just realized that I involuntarily skipped the holistic review question. So So I really apologize for that. I was already so into the dynamics of the meeting that I involuntarily skipped that topic. But I believe Avery would like to make some comment on that topic. So Avery, if you would like.
Better.
Sure. Yeah. No. Was basically waiting my turn. So on the ATRT3, and I'll go through it quickly because we don't have much time left. On the ATRT3, we certainly did prioritize part of it, and that was to get the prioritization underway. And also we have, and there'll be another one soon, basically for every one of the reviews that was suggested that it be deferred, as the time of that review comes up, we do a deferral. Now, assuming that the reviews and a holistic are indeed prioritized in the prioritization, and I'm assuming that'll be the case, but I can't, know for sure. We need to be ready for it immediately. And I think that that's part of the reason. In fact, I know that's part of the reason that we've already started the work or are in the process of starting the work to determine the terms of reference for that holistic review, because we have seen a large diversity of views in the community about what the holistic review should do in its first instance in that first 18. We're talking about an 18-month period, so there will be a limit. So I had hoped that terms of reference group, which is a collaborative effort between the shepherds of ATRT3 and the board's OEC members, would have started before 73, but it will start right after 73. I think we're in good shape for that. So I think that is being worked on, assuming the holistic review is determined as, a top priority. I'm hoping that we will be ready to move with it, having finished or at least near finished the term of reference work. So we are taking it very seriously and really do want to set the ground so that as soon as the priority hits, it's ready to roll. Thanks.
Thank you, Avery. And I see Matthew's hand up. Matthew?
Yeah, thanks, Leon. And I think this may be going a little bit into the next subject, but ALAC, I understand, has been very involved in the development of this upcoming prioritization pilot that's being managed by Xavier's team in org. And I'm suspecting that among those items that will be up for prioritization in that process, which I understand will start imminently, will be the recommendation from the board that a pilot be set up for the holistic review. And so I suspect that will be part of that, and that the community will be discussing that. The community representatives will be discussing that as a part of that prioritization pilot. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. Good. So if there are no more comments on this topic, we can go back to our regular program after this detour I took. So Maureen, back to you.
Yeah, well, I think Matthew has actually segued really well into Cheryl's session. So up to you now, Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Yes, a perfect segue. Thank you, Matthew. It's almost like we'd rehearsed it. Not that we did. I want to assure everybody. It's Cheryl Langdon for the record, and I want to thank ALAC for allowing me to be empaneled for this very brief intervention. Just wanted to raise on behalf of not just the at-large advisory committee and at-large in general, but part of its very important structure, the Operation Finance and Budget Subcommittee, which in itself has had a small group, which many of us in this call have been very actively participating in, dedicated to the prioritisation exercises that need necessarily to be prepared for, and that we see as in these conversations being kicked off right now and working with Xavier's team, etc. part of what we have done as this small team is we took the 201 recommendations at the time of the end of 2020. In our meeting at the end of 2020, we did a thresher activity and looked at all those recommendations. It left 201 that we could not see evidence of having been prioritised yet and that needed to be dealt with in some way, shape or form. We've done a deep dive in on all of those. I did actually have a graphic, but if it's not on the slide deck, that's fine. If it is, that's even better because it's there. You are, nice and simple. What it basically is weekly meetings since the end of 2020 that have been dedicated and worked with subject matter experts, and by that the groups we've worked with are the authors of the recommendations and the leads or co-chairs and chairs of the various teams and theme tracks. Couldn't get the word out for a moment there, tracks in some of the cross-community activities to make sure that we understood the intent because as all of you know, I'm sure, on the board, that many of the earlier reviews were not as tightly designed in terms of even the specificity of its chartering, but also particularly the nature of what recommendations should be in terms of being measurable and clear and distinct and all those sorts of things as was piloted during ATRT3. And so we have way too many things to do and far too many resources to do them with. And we need to clear that catalogue. In preparation for those bigger exercises, these meetings have gone on and we have applied through a number of things that I'm not going to go into now, but there's a full session on later on today at I think 18:30 UTC. If anyone wants to join, you're more than welcome to do so. We'll go into all the methodologies and information there. But what we've done is taken a must-have, should have, could have, and not so much won't have, but won't have perhaps now, approach to things. It looks very simple on this graphic because it's a very familiar sort of quadranted matrix model, but in fact the output there is one where there is a reprioritization potential for things, a ability to track and see how progress is going on all recommendations. And of course, also note that as various circumstances and sometimes resourcing changes, the whole thing needs to be reconsidered. So it's really just a indicator to the board of how very important the volunteers within the at-large community and the ALAC and its particular subcommittees have taken the preparation for its contributions into the larger prioritisation framework activities has been. Hundreds of hours, a great deal of effort, and we think some very solid, accountable and transparent material that is now in a tool which has been named the at-large or ALAC, I should say ALAC Prioritisation Assessment Tool. It has utility now and we believe it'll have utility to us in the future. That's pretty much my advertisement. Maureen, was there anything else you needed me to cover off? If not, I'm aware of the time.
Good.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Leon, for sort of like giving us that opportunity to sort of like air our grievances, whatever they may be. But you know, that the board, knowing that the board listens, and that we'll, you know, and we'll provide each other with feedback on these topics, and you know, in the coming months anyway. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Cheryl. It is clear that prioritization is a priority. So I definitely encourage us all to work together on this again. And with that, I would like to hand it back to Maarten, so we can close the session. We have 1 minute left. So Maarten, and of course, thank you all for attending and participating.
Thank you for granting me 30 seconds. And yes, indeed, it's been a great session. And for all those attending that are not so often privy to our exchanges, this is really what we do. And this is really what we engage all the time. This hour is a marker time, but we talk all the time. And indeed, also the point brought up with Jonathan, it's points that can be brought up constantly because we are constantly looking for opportunities to improve our support for you, interaction with you, and we do want to understand everything you bring to us as well, very well. So as you know, recently also we've worked on improving the process of making sure we understand the advice from all advisory committees very well, including ALAC, and David is leading that, and that's really good. So thank you for helping us to see where we are today, and with your suggestion for moving on. We have some takeaways and look forward to engaging with you later this week, and wishing you well in your engagement with ALAC and with other parts of the community as well. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.